You dare challenge me here?
I have no choice.
Then kneel or be broken.
The battlefield of Karos 9 was quiet after the war. Broken ships burned slowly under a red sky. The ground was black with ash and metal. This was a place where fear stayed even after the fighting ended. Alien warriors moved through the ruins like walking towers. They were tall, heavy, and covered in battle armor. Among them stood one who was feared even by his own kind, an 8-meter-tall alien warrior known for crushing enemies with his hands. Humans were prisoners here, small, weak, and easy to control. They were kept alive only because they were useful. No one expected courage from a human on Karos 9. One human stood apart from the others. His name was Daniel. He was not a hero or a commander. He was only a translator taken during a border conflict. Daniel's clothes were torn and dirty. His face showed signs of exhaustion, but his eyes were calm. Too calm for a human surrounded by monsters. The giant alien warrior noticed him. He stopped moving. The ground shook slightly as he turned. His shadow fell over Daniel like a mountain. Other aliens watched with interest. They knew what usually happened next. The giant enjoyed fear. Fear proved his power. The warrior stepped closer. Each step was slow and heavy. He bent down until his massive face was close to the human. His eyes burned like hot metal. He spoke in a deep voice that echoed across the ruins. "Are you afraid of me, human?" The question was simple, but everyone knew it was dangerous. Most humans cried. Some fainted. Others begged for mercy. Daniel felt fear rise in his chest. His heart beat fast. His hands trembled for a moment, but he did not step back. He looked up at the giant alien warrior. He saw scars. He saw old pain. He saw loneliness hidden behind strength. The aliens around them leaned closer. They wanted to see the human break. They wanted to hear the sound of fear. Daniel took a slow breath. His voice was soft but clear. "No," he said. "I love you." The world seemed to stop. The wind slowed. The fires crackled quietly. Silence spread across the battlefield. The alien warrior froze. His eyes widened slightly. No one had ever answered him like that. Not an enemy, not an ally. The other aliens reacted instantly. Some laughed loudly. Some shouted in anger. Some raised their weapons. "A human is mocking you," one alien growled. "Crush him," another demanded. Daniel did not laugh. He did not smile. He stood still and waited, ready for death if it came. The giant warrior did not strike. Slowly, he straightened to his full height. He looked down at the human again, this time with confusion. "Explain," the warrior said. Daniel swallowed. Fear was still there, but he spoke honestly. "I am afraid," he said, "but fear is not all I feel." He pointed weakly at the battlefield around them. "You fight because you were taught to. You destroy because you were shaped to. But you are alone." The alien warrior's hands tightened into fists. The ground cracked under his weight. For a moment, everyone thought Daniel would die. Instead, the warrior turned away slightly. His voice dropped. "You know nothing about me," he said. Daniel answered carefully. "I know what it feels like to be used. I know what it feels like to be seen as less. And I know what it feels like to survive anyway." The battlefield stayed silent. The giant alien warrior said nothing. His breathing was slow and heavy. Around them, soldiers from both sides watched. They did not understand what was happening. This was not how power worked. This was not how fear worked. Before anything else could be said, an alarm echoed from the distant camp. Enemy signals appeared on scanners. Another conflict was coming. The giant warrior looked down at Daniel one last time. He did not smile. He did not threaten. "Stay close," he said. That single command shocked everyone. A human standing beside a monster, not as a prisoner, not as prey. Before the scene moved on, a gentle reminder was shared with the audience. If you enjoy deep HFY sci-fi stories like this and want to see how this strange bond changes the galaxy, Please consider subscribing to this channel and staying with us. As the warrior began to walk, the ground shaking with each step, Daniel followed, not knowing if he was walking toward safety or death. Only knowing that one honest answer had changed everything, the giant alien warrior walked toward the command camp. Each step made the ground shake beneath him. Daniel followed a few steps behind. Every eye on the battlefield stayed locked on the strange pair. Every eye on the battlefield stayed locked on the strange pair. Whispers moved faster than bullets. A human walking freely beside a living weapon. Some aliens felt anger. Others felt fear. Inside the camp, armored alien officers gathered quickly. Weapons were raised. Orders were shouted. No one trusted what they were seeing. The giant warrior stopped in the center of the camp. He turned slowly and looked down at Daniel. "You spoke without fear," he said. "That makes you dangerous." Daniel felt his throat tighten. He knew the truth. His words could still kill him. "I did not speak to challenge you," Daniel replied. "I spoke because it was true." An alien commander stepped forward angrily. "Great warrior," he said, "this human insulted you. Give the order and we will end him." The giant warrior raised one massive hand. The commander stopped instantly. Silence returned, heavy and tense. "He did not insult me," the warrior said. "He confused me." That single sentence caused shock across the camp. Confusion was not something the giant warrior ever showed. He was known for clear violence, not doubt. Daniel felt the weight of attention press on him. He was taken to a secured holding area, not a prison cell, not freedom either. Alien guards stood outside the transparent barrier, their weapons never lowered. Daniel sat alone on the cold floor, his body tired, his mind racing. He replayed the moment again and again. The question, the answer, the silence that followed. Far above, the giant alien warrior stood before his own leaders. They spoke in harsh tones. "You allowed a human to survive disrespect," one elder said. "You showed weakness," another added. The warrior did not react with anger. "I asked a question," he said calmly. He answered honestly. "Honesty does not matter," an elder replied. "Fear does." The warrior turned his head slowly. "Fear creates obedience," he said, "not loyalty." That word spread like poison through the council. Loyalty was dangerous. Loyalty could change things. That night, Daniel was woken by soft movement. The lights dimmed slightly. The guards outside stiffened. Something was wrong. A shadow moved beyond the barrier. Then another. Daniel's instincts screamed. Suddenly the barrier shut down. The guards collapsed without sound. 3 alien figures stepped inside. Their armor was dark. Their movements silent. Assassins. Daniel stood slowly, his hands empty, his heart pounding. "The human must die," one assassin said quietly. "He weakens the warrior." Before they could move closer, the ground shook violently. A massive force slammed into the holding chamber wall. Metal bent like soft clay. The giant alien warrior burst through the barrier. One assassin was crushed instantly. Another was thrown across the room. The third tried to escape, but the warrior's hand closed around him. Silence returned again, broken only by heavy breathing. The warrior looked at Daniel, his voice lower now. "They want you dead," he said. Daniel nodded slowly. "I expected that." The warrior studied him carefully. "You are not afraid now either," he said. Daniel answered honestly, "I am afraid, but I chose my words already." That answer stayed in the air between them. The warrior turned away and issued orders. "Increase security. No one touches the human without my command." Across the camp, reactions spread. Some aliens felt relief. Others felt rage. Rumors grew stronger. A human had survived the warrior's anger. A human had been protected by him. Far beyond the planet, enemy scouts intercepted signals. They noticed changes, unusual movements, a pattern they did not understand. One report reached enemy command. The giant warrior is unstable. He is influenced by a human. Plans were adjusted, weapons prepared, because the galaxy did not fear humans yet. But it was starting to fear what humans could change. The camp did not sleep that night. Lights stayed on. Guards doubled their patrols. Every alien felt that something had shifted. Daniel was moved from the holding area before sunrise. Not dragged, not pushed, but escorted carefully. The giant alien warrior walked ahead of him, silent and unreadable. His massive armor carried marks of countless battles. Yet his steps were slower now, thoughtful. They entered a wide stone chamber carved deep into the planet. This place was older than the war, older than the camp, a place where fear was tested. Alien elders waited in a circle, their eyes cold and judging. "This is the trial of fear," one elder announced. "No being may stand near our warrior without passing it." Daniel understood immediately. This was not about rules. This was about control. The giant warrior turned slightly and spoke low. "You may leave now. No shame will follow." Daniel looked up at him. Fear pressed hard against his chest, but he shook his head slowly. "I will stay." Murmurs spread among the elders. Humans rarely chose pain when escape was offered. The floor of the chamber changed. Stone melted into dark liquid metal. Images rose from it like living shadows. Daniel's first fear appeared. Earth cities burning, human voices screaming, the sky falling apart. His breath broke, his hands clenched, his knees shook. The elders watched closely. "This is where humans fail," one whispered. Daniel forced himself to stand still. He did not fight the images. He let them pass through him, like storms that could not be stopped. The scene shifted. Now he stood alone in space. No air, no sound, only endless dark. Fear tightened around his heart. He felt small, unimportant, forgotten. The giant alien warrior watched silently. His fists slowly closed. "You fear isolation," an elder said. "Good." Daniel whispered to himself. "Fear is not the end." The shadows changed again. This time the giant warrior appeared, towering, angry, raising his hand to strike. The chamber held its breath. Daniel's body screamed at him to run, but he stayed where he was, looking up at the shadow version of the warrior. "I know you," Daniel said quietly. "You are not the real one." The shadow froze, cracked, and shattered into smoke. The elders shifted uneasily. "That should not have happened," one said. The final fear rose without warning. Daniel saw himself kneeling, begging, losing his voice, losing himself. This fear hurt the most, because it felt possible. Daniel fell to one knee, pain spreading through his chest. Tears filled his eyes. The giant alien warrior took one step forward, enough to shake the chamber. "End the trial," he growled. The elders hesitated. "This is his fear," one replied. "He must face it." Daniel lifted his head slowly, his voice weak but steady. "I am afraid," he said, "but I will not kneel." The image cracked. The chamber went still. The liquid metal hardened. The trial ended. Silence filled the room. Not the silence of power, but the silence of surprise. No human had ever completed the trial of fear. Not because they lacked fear, but because they let it control them. Daniel stood, exhausted, his legs shaking, his face pale. The giant alien warrior turned fully toward him. For the first time, his voice was quiet. "You stood," he said. Daniel nodded. "Fear does not decide who we are." The elders spoke among themselves in low tones, uneasy, concerned. This human did not fit their understanding. But danger had not ended. A sharp sound cut through the chamber. An alarm signal. Foreign energy signatures detected near the camp. Enemy forces were moving closer, and they had noticed something strange. A report echoed through command channels. The giant warrior hesitates. He listens. He protects a human. That report changed everything. The giant alien warrior looked toward the distant sky, then back at Daniel. You have passed fear, he said. Now you must face what comes because of it. Daniel followed his gaze, toward the coming war, toward consequences he never wanted. The trial of fear was over, but a greater trial had just begun. The alarm did not stop after the trial of fear ended. It grew louder and sharper. Red lights flooded the stone chamber. Enemy forces were closer than anyone expected. The elders moved quickly. Orders were given. Guards rushed in from every direction. The calm of the trial was gone. Daniel felt weak but alert. Fear still lived inside him, but it no longer ruled him. He stood beside the giant alien warrior without being told. The warrior looked down at him. You should stay behind, he said. This is no place for a human. Daniel shook his head slowly. I stayed before, he replied. I will stay again. Before the warrior could answer, the ground shook violently. An explosion echoed from the outer wall of the camp. Dust fell from the ceiling. The enemy had arrived. Alien soldiers ran past the chamber entrance. Weapons charged. Voices shouting in sharp commands. Chaos spread fast. Suddenly, a group of enemy attackers broke through the side corridor. Fast, armored, and deadly, they moved with purpose. Not toward the camp, but toward the warrior. They came for you, Daniel said quietly. The giant warrior stepped forward instantly. His body became a shield. He met the attacker's head on. Metal clashed. Energy weapons screamed. Daniel pressed himself against the wall, watching the battle unfold. The warrior was powerful, but even power had limits. One enemy slipped past, moving too fast. A blade aimed straight for the warrior's exposed side. Daniel did not think. He moved. He grabbed a fallen alien weapon from the ground. Heavy and unfamiliar, he threw himself forward and struck the attacker from behind. Not with strength, but with timing. The blade missed the warrior by inches. The enemy fell, stunned and screaming. The giant warrior turned sharply. His eyes locked onto Daniel. For a brief moment, shock replaced fury. Why? The warrior demanded. You could have died. Daniel's hands shook. His voice steady but quiet. Because you would have died first, he answered. The remaining enemies retreated quickly, dragging their wounded. The corridor fell silent again. Blood covered the stone floor, not all of it alien. The warrior's armor was cracked. Dark blood ran from a deep wound in his side. Daniel stepped closer without thinking. You are hurt, he said. The warrior tried to stand tall, but his weight shifted. He stumbled, only slightly, but enough. Daniel moved under his arm, small and fragile beside a giant, yet steady, helping him lean against the wall. Alien soldiers arrived seconds later. They froze when they saw the scene. A human supporting the great warrior. Blood on both of them. Get healers, one officer shouted. For once, no one questioned it. As they waited, the warrior looked down at Daniel, his voice low and rough. You chose pain for me. Daniel met his gaze. I chose you, he replied. Those words carried more weight than weapons. The warrior closed his eyes briefly. Something inside him shifted. Healers arrived and worked quickly, sealing wounds, stabilizing armor. Daniel stepped back, exhausted. When it was over, the warrior stood again, still towering, still dangerous, but changed. The elders watched from a distance, their expressions uneasy. This was no longer just protection. This was a bond. Later, when the camp settled into uneasy calm, Daniel sat alone near the fire line, his hands stained with blood, his body shaking now that the danger had passed. The giant warrior approached quietly. He sat across from Daniel, lowering himself to eye level. In my kind, the warrior said, blood shared in battle creates a bond. It cannot be broken. Daniel swallowed. I did not know that. The warrior nodded. Now you do. In the distance, enemy forces regrouped. Watching, learning, they had seen a human save a monster. They had seen a bond form where fear once lived. War was coming, not just of weapons, but of loyalty, and somewhere between blood and courage. A human and a giant had crossed a line that could never be undone. The camp did not celebrate after the attack. There was no victory feeling, only heavy silence and waiting. Everyone knew the enemy would return stronger. Smoke rose from damaged towers. Wounded soldiers were carried past in silence. The ground still smelled of blood and burned metal. War had only paused, not ended. Daniel sat near the command fire. His body hurt. His hands still shook when he looked at them. He had saved a monster, and the monster had let him live. Across the camp, the giant alien warrior stood as healers finished their work. His armor was repaired, but scars remained. Not all wounds could be closed. Some stayed inside. Alien officers gathered around him. Their voices were tense and divided. "The enemy will strike again before dawn," one said. "They have seen weakness," another warned. The warrior listened but did not speak. His eyes moved instead toward Daniel. That simple movement changed the mood. Some officers noticed. Some felt fear. Daniel was called into the strategy circle. For the first time, no one pushed him away. No one laughed. They only watched him closely. "The enemy learned our strength," an officer said. "They will come with numbers, with heavier weapons." Daniel took a breath. He was only human, but humans had survived worse. "They expect you to fight like before," Daniel said. "That is why they will lose." Some aliens growled in disagreement, but the giant warrior raised his hand. "Speak," he ordered. Daniel stepped closer to the map display. Simple lines, simple shapes. "This camp looks strong," he explained. "So they will hit it directly." A commander shook his head. "That is obvious." "That is the problem," Daniel replied. "Obvious plans get killed." He pointed at a narrow canyon outside the camp. "Small, ignored, dangerous. They will not expect you to move there." Silence followed, then low murmurs. "You want us to retreat?" an officer asked sharply. Daniel shook his head. "No," he said. "I want you to invite them." The giant warrior's eyes narrowed slightly, a sign of interest. "Explain," he said. Daniel spoke carefully. "We look weak. We pull back slowly. They rush in, and we collapse the ground around them." Some aliens protested loudly. "That terrain is unstable. That could kill our own." Daniel nodded. "Yes, that is why it works." Humans had learned long ago that survival was not clean. Sometimes you risked everything, or you lost it all. The warrior looked around the circle. One by one, the protests died. Finally, he spoke. "We do it." The plan moved fast. Units repositioned. Explosives placed quietly. Signals sent in silence. Before dawn, enemy forces arrived. Their ships darkened the sky. Their soldiers moved with confidence. They believed the camp was breaking. The giant warrior stood at the front line. Daniel beside him, small and unarmored, but steady. Enemy fire struck the camp edge. Aliens fell back as planned. To the enemy, it looked like fear. Then the canyon erupted. The ground collapsed inward. Enemy forces fell into chaos. Trapped, scattered, screaming, the warrior roared and charged. Alien defenders followed, not as individuals, but as one force. Daniel watched as monsters fell, not because the warrior was stronger, but because humans had stood their ground. The enemy retreated in panic, leaving weapons, leaving wounded, leaving fear behind. As silence returned again, the camp looked different, not damaged, but awakened. Alien soldiers looked at Daniel with new eyes, not as a prisoner, not as a weakness, but as something dangerous. The giant warrior turned to him. "You stood," he said, "and monsters fell." Far away, enemy commanders sent urgent reports. The human changes them. Kill the human, or everything breaks. The war was no longer about territory. It was about one simple truth. When humans stand, even monsters fall. The enemy did not retreat far. They pulled back only enough to breathe and think. Across the dark horizon, their ships regrouped, watching the camp with new caution. Inside the camp, silence followed the battle. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of realization. Everything had changed. Alien soldiers moved differently now. They no longer ignored the human. They no longer laughed. Some even nodded when Daniel passed. The giant alien warrior stood at the center of the camp, his armor scarred, his posture strong, yet his eyes searched for one figure only. Daniel sat near a broken wall, his body exhausted, his mind heavy. He felt the weight of what he had become. The warrior approached him slowly. "You fought without weapons," he said. "You risked everything." Daniel looked up. "I did not fight," he replied. "I stayed." That answer unsettled the warrior more than any battle. In his world, strength was force. Victory was destruction. But this human fought differently. Before more could be said, an urgent signal echoed through the camp. Enemy communication intercepted. A message meant to break them. The alien commanders gathered around the display. The message played openly, so all could hear. "We know your weakness," the enemy leader said. "The human. Give him to us, or we burn everything." A low growl moved through the camp. Weapons were raised. Anger filled the air. Daniel felt the eyes turn toward him, not with blame, but concern. The giant warrior stepped forward immediately. "No," he said. The word was final. The enemy leader laughed through the signal. "You protect him. That makes you predictable." The warrior clenched his fists. Daniel stood and spoke before he could stop himself. "They think caring is weakness," Daniel said. "They are wrong." An officer snapped back. "They will use you. They will tear this camp apart." Daniel nodded slowly. "They already planned to. At least now they are afraid." That was the truth. The enemy was no longer confident. They were cautious, and fear changed how wars were fought. The giant warrior looked down at Daniel. "In my kind," he said quietly, "attachment leads to death." Daniel met his gaze. "In mine," he replied, "it gives us a reason to survive." That moment sealed something deeper than battle. Not spoken, not announced, but felt. The enemy attacked again before night fully fell. Not with full force, but with precision, targeting the camp edges, testing reactions. The warrior moved instantly to defend. Daniel stayed close, not hiding, not running. When a blast threw Daniel to the ground, the warrior shielded him without thinking, taking the impact across his own armor. Alien soldiers saw it clearly, the strongest among them protecting the weakest, not out of command, but choice. That image spread faster than orders, through ranks and channels, changing loyalty, changing belief. The enemy noticed too. Their leader hissed in frustration. "They are bonded. Break it." A final message was sent. A challenge, a dual demand. "Send the warrior," the enemy leader said, "or we erase the human first." The camp held its breath. This was not just strategy now. This was personal. The giant warrior turned to Daniel, his voice low. "They want to use you." Daniel nodded. "They already are." The warrior straightened to his full height, then did something no one expected. He lowered himself slightly, to meet Daniel at eye level. "They think love weakens us," the warrior said, "but it sharpens my focus." Daniel swallowed. Fear returned, but so did resolve. The warrior turned toward the enemy signal. "Come," he growled. "You want weakness. I will show you strength born from it." Across the battlefield, enemy forces prepared. They believed they had found the weapon to end the war. They did not understand one thing. For humans, love was not a weakness. It was a weapon. The battlefield was silent before the final clash. Not calm, not peaceful, but tense like a breath held too long. Enemy forces stood ready beyond the broken land, their weapons charged, their leaders confident. They believed fear would finish what war could not. At the center of it all stood the giant alien warrior, 8 meters tall, scarred and heavy with battle. Across from him waited the enemy champion, a creature built for killing. Daniel stood behind the warrior, small, unarmed, human. Every instinct told him to run, but he did not move. The enemy leader's voice echoed across the field. Human, it called. Look at what you stand beside. Look at what will destroy you. Daniel felt fear rise again, cold and sharp, but he understood it now. Fear was a signal, not a command. The giant warrior glanced back once. You do not have to stay, he said quietly. Daniel stepped forward instead. His legs shook, his voice steady. I am here, he said. The enemy laughed. A human who thinks love can stop war. Daniel looked up at the giant warrior, then at the enemy. I do not stop war, he said. I survive it. The duel began without warning. The ground cracked as the two massive warriors collided. Blades of energy tore through the air. Shockwaves knocked soldiers to their knees. Daniel watched every movement, every opening, every mistake. The enemy champion was faster, stronger, designed to win. The giant warrior fought with rage and purpose, but the wounds from earlier battles slowed him. Blood darkened his armor. The enemy saw it and pressed harder, strike after strike, driving the warrior backward. Alien soldiers shouted warnings. Some turned away, unable to watch their strongest fall. Daniel felt panic rise. This was the moment fear tried to take control. This was the moment humans usually broke. Instead, Daniel ran forward. Shouts followed him. Weapons were raised, but no one fired. Daniel stood between giants, his heart pounding, his voice cutting through the chaos. Look at me, he shouted. The enemy paused in confusion. The giant warrior froze. Daniel, he warned. Daniel looked at the enemy champion. You think fear wins wars, he said. You think love makes us weak. He spread his empty hands. I am afraid, he admitted, but I am still here. The enemy hesitated. That hesitation was human, and that made it dangerous. The giant warrior moved, not with rage, but with focus. One clean strike followed, then another. The enemy champion fell, the ground shaking as it hit. Silence crashed down across the battlefield. Enemy soldiers stared in disbelief. Their strongest had fallen. Daniel stood frozen, waiting for pain, waiting for death. None came. The giant warrior turned and lowered himself slowly, coming down to Daniel's level. He placed one massive hand on the ground, a sign of respect among his kind. You did not run, the warrior said. You stood. Daniel exhaled shakily. So did you, he replied. Across the field, enemy forces began to retreat, first slowly, then in panic, their fear now louder than any weapon. Alien soldiers cheered, not for victory, but for survival. They looked at Daniel differently now, not as weak, not as fragile, but as something unbreakable. Later, as fires died down and wounded were treated, Daniel sat quietly beside the warrior. The war finally over. You changed everything, the warrior said. Daniel shook his head. I just answered honestly. The warrior looked out across the battlefield. Fear ruled my life, he said, until you showed me another way. Daniel smiled faintly. Fear never left, he said. I just stopped letting it decide. Word of the battle spread across systems. A human had faced monsters without weapons. A human had stood without kneeling. From that day on, stories changed. Humans were no longer described as weak. They were described as dangerous in a new way, because the galaxy learned one simple truth. The most terrifying human was not the one without fear, but the human who was afraid, and stood anyway,